The alien princess was told she could never bear children until she married a human princess. Ilara stood at the edge of the grand balcony, her golden eyes staring out over the alien city of Veldar, a sprawling metropolis of glistening spires and advanced technology. The wind whispered softly through her long silver hair, but she couldn't feel its touch. There was an unshakable weight on her heart, a burden she had carried for as long as she could remember. The prophecy, the curse, it had defined her life in ways no one could understand. The Veldari, her people, were a race of advanced beings, known for their intelligence and longevity. They had built cities that touched the sky, traveled the stars, and explored the far reaches of the galaxy. But despite all their achievements, they were bound by ancient traditions, rules set down by the elders long before Ilara was born. One rule in particular was the most crushing of all. As the Veldari princess, she was destined to never have children. It was a cruel fate for one meant to rule, and it had been foretold in an ancient prophecy. The elders claimed that she would never bear a child unless she married a human. Humans, a primitive species compared to the Veldari, but still essential for the fulfillment of this curse. The prophecy was clear. A union between her and a human was the only way to break her curse. It was the only way to ensure that the royal bloodline would continue, but she didn't believe it. How could she? The idea of marrying a human seemed absurd, especially when she had spent her life surrounded by Veldari nobles, warriors, and scholars who had always viewed themselves as superior. The thought of marrying a human, one of the very beings who had once been beneath their notice, filled her with anger and confusion. Yet the prophecy had not been wrong before. Her mother had told her countless stories about how it had been passed down through the ages, never failing to come true. And now, the time had come for the prophecy to be fulfilled. Ilara turned away from the view, her eyes scanning the grand hall that stretched before her. The royal council would soon arrive, and with them, the decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She had been raised for this moment, groomed to take on the mantle of leadership. But the thought of being forced into marriage was an indignity she couldn't accept. She crossed the room, her boots clicking on the polished marble floor, and stopped in front of a large mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, tall and regal, dressed in the fine silks of her station. She was a princess, the future queen of the Veldari, and yet she felt small in that moment. She had always dreamed of a future of her own making, but now that future was being handed to her by fate. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Her handmaiden, Myra, entered the room with a bow of respect. Myra was one of the few who had never bowed to tradition. She had always been a voice of reason, someone Ilara could trust when everything else seemed uncertain. "Your Highness," Myra said, her voice calm but filled with a hint of concern. "The council is waiting." Ilara nodded, her heart heavy. "I know, I'll be there shortly." Myra hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Do you believe in the prophecy, my princess?" Ilara turned to face her, her eyes searching Myra's face for the answer she longed to hear. "No," she whispered. "I cannot, it's too impossible." Myra smiled softly. "Maybe so, but sometimes the impossible happens when we least expect it." Ilara couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope at her words, but it was fleeting. She had spent her entire life being trained to lead her people, not to be tied to some distant human's fate. She couldn't allow herself to believe that someone from a lesser species could be the key to her future. But Myra was right about one thing. She didn't have a choice. Reluctantly, Ilara followed her handmaiden down the corridor toward the council chamber. As they walked, the distant hum of the city seemed to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of her own footsteps. The doors to the council chamber stood before her, and with a deep breath she stepped inside. The council members were seated at a long, obsidian table, their faces stern and expectant. They were the most powerful beings in Veldar, and they had always seen themselves as the guardians of tradition. They were the ones who had chosen this fate for her, and now they were the ones who would decide if she would ever have the chance to break it. The head of the council, Elder Varnak, stood as she entered, his eyes fixed on her with the weight of authority. He was an old, imposing figure, his long, white beard trailing down to his chest. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met hers with a quiet intensity. "Princess Ilara," he began, his voice deep and resonant, "you are here because your fate is sealed. The prophecy demands that you marry a human to restore your ability to bear children. There is no turning back from this path. The time has come for you to fulfill your destiny. Elara clenched her fists at her sides, her jaw tightening. I refuse to be treated as a tool for some prophecy, Elder Varnak, she said, her voice cold. I am a Veldari princess, and I will not be forced into marriage with a human. Varnak's eyes narrowed, but he did not raise his voice. The prophecy is not to be questioned, princess. It has been foretold that your union with a human will bring balance to our people and to the galaxy. You will marry, and you will bear the next generation of rulers. Elara's mind raced, but she knew she was powerless to stop the flow of events. The council was unwavering in their commitment to tradition, and she was trapped by the weight of her bloodline. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing against her with the force of centuries of tradition. There is nothing I can do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Varnak's expression softened, but only slightly. You may choose your mate, princess. That is the only choice you have. Elara looked down at the floor, her mind swirling with confusion. The idea of choosing a mate from the humans felt like an impossible task. How could she choose someone she didn't know, someone from a species that was considered beneath her own? It felt like an insult to everything she had been taught. But in that moment, as she stood before the council, she realized something. This wasn't just about breaking a curse. This was about power. The Veldari had never understood the true potential of humans, but perhaps it was time to see them for what they truly were, more than just a means to an end. Perhaps, in this strange twist of fate, the humans had something to teach her after all. I will choose, Elara said finally, her voice steady. But I will not marry a human just to fulfill some outdated prophecy. I will choose with my own heart. Elder Varnak nodded. Then the path is set. You will meet your mate soon, princess. The fate of your people rests in your hands. As Elara turned and walked out of the council chamber, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. The prophecy was no longer just a distant tale. It was her reality, and now she would face it head-on. The journey ahead would be unlike anything she had ever imagined, and the man she was about to meet would change everything. But whether that change would be for better or worse, she couldn't yet tell. Princess Elara paced restlessly in her chambers, her thoughts swirling like the winds outside her window. The day had been long, filled with the weight of the prophecy and the decision that loomed over her. She was to marry a human, a mere human, because of an ancient curse. It was an impossible thought, yet here she was, a princess of the most powerful race in the galaxy, about to be bound to someone from a species she had been taught to consider inferior. She stopped by the window, her reflection now a mere blur in the glass. Outside, the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting an orange glow across the skyline of Veldar. The city shimmered with life, its towering structures reflecting the advanced civilization that had taken thousands of years to build. And yet, no matter how grand her home was, no matter how impressive her people's achievements were, nothing could take away the feeling of helplessness that clung to her like a shadow. A soft knock at the door brought her back to the present. She straightened herself, pushing away the weight of the thoughts that threatened to overwhelm her. Come in, Elara called, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The door opened, revealing her handmaiden, Myra. The young woman stepped inside with a quiet grace, her eyes filled with concern. Elara had always trusted Myra, perhaps more than anyone else. Myra had been her friend for years, someone who had stood by her side through the trials of royal life. She was not just a servant, she was a confidant. Your Highness, you're still awake? Myra asked gently, her voice filled with tenderness. The council has given their instructions. It's a lot to bear. Elara sighed, turning away from the window. It's more than I ever imagined. I thought that being a princess meant I could shape my own future, but now I see that I'm just a puppet, bound by a prophecy that isn't even of my making. Myra approached and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that Elara had grown to depend on. You're more than that, Elara. The prophecy may have shaped your path, but it does not define who you are. You have the power to change it. Elara shook her head. But I don't know how. The prophecy says I must marry a human to break the curse, and the council has already chosen him. Chosen him? Myra raised an eyebrow, her tone skeptical. I thought they left it up to you to decide. You have the right to choose your mate. Elara nodded. I do, but what kind of choice is it? I know nothing about this human. He is nothing more than a pawn in a game that has already been decided for me. Myra smiled faintly. But you do have a choice. You don't have to marry him just to fulfill the prophecy. If this is to be your fate, then you should have the freedom to choose someone who at least deserves your trust. Ilara looked at Myra, a small spark of hope flickering in her heart. And how am I to know if I can trust someone I don't even know? That's what you'll have to find out, Myra said softly. Take the time to understand him. You may not be able to change the prophecy, but you can still change how you face it. Ilara's heart felt heavy, but at least now she had a sliver of hope. Maybe Myra was right. Maybe there was more to this than she had initially thought. She didn't have to blindly follow the council's demands. She could take control of her own future, even within the confines of this seemingly impossible prophecy. The next day, the human was brought to her. His name was Captain Noah Miller. He was tall, with short brown hair and a rugged demeanor that spoke of years spent in battle. His piercing blue eyes met hers with a quiet confidence, though she could see the wariness beneath his calm exterior. The moment they locked eyes, Ilara felt a strange pull, something she couldn't quite explain. "Princess Ilara," he said with a slight bow, his voice deep and steady. "It's an honor to meet you." Ilara didn't respond immediately. She studied him, taking in the sharp lines of his jaw, the way his uniform clung to his broad shoulders. He was nothing like the Veldari men she had known, who were always poised, always calculating. Noah Miller, in contrast, seemed raw, unpolished, like a man who had lived through trials and emerged stronger for them. There was strength in his eyes, but it was a different kind of strength than she had ever seen before. And though it made her uneasy, she couldn't help but feel an odd sense of curiosity toward him. "Captain Miller," she finally said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "I understand that you've been chosen to be my partner in this union. But tell me, what do you know of the Veldari prophecy?" Noah looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know that this is not something either of us wanted, but here we are." Ilara's gaze narrowed. "You don't seem thrilled to be here." Noah shrugged, his hands clasped behind his back. "It's not about what I want, it's about what needs to happen. I've been told that this union is important, that it's the only way to break your curse." Ilara frowned. "A curse that was placed on me long before either of us had any say in it. Does it matter how it began?" Noah asked, his voice gentle but firm. "What matters now is that we're here and we have a choice. The prophecy may tell us what we must do, but we decide how we do it." Ilara blinked, surprised by the calm certainty in his words. She had expected him to be more compliant, more like the other Veldari men who had always followed orders without question. But Noah Miller was different. He didn't seem afraid of her or her people. He didn't bow to the traditions and expectations that the Veldari lived by. It was unsettling, but in a strange way, it made her feel as though she had finally met someone who saw her as more than just a princess bound by her people's laws. "You speak as if you know me already," Ilara said, her voice softening just slightly. Noah met her gaze with a hint of a smile. "Maybe I do, or maybe I'm just trying to understand you. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not. And if we're going to make it work, we need to figure out how." Ilara took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time since she had learned of the prophecy, she felt a flicker of something new, something that had nothing to do with the curse, the council, or her people's expectations. It was the beginning of a choice, one that was hers to make. As Noah spoke, she realized that this marriage, this strange partnership, could be the key to unlocking not just her future, but something far greater. The prophecy was only the beginning. She was going to face this challenge on her own terms, with Noah by her side, not as a pawn, but as someone who might help her break free from the chains of tradition. And for the first time in her life, Ilara felt as though she might have the power to change her fate. Ilara sat at the grand table, her eyes focused on the delicate patterns etched into the surface. The day had begun like any other, yet everything felt different now. Captain Noah Miller had become a presence in her life that she couldn't ignore. Despite their differences, something about him had begun to draw her in. It was strange. Her people, the Veldari, had always prided themselves on their intellect, their culture, and their control. But Noah, this human warrior, was unlike anything she had ever known. She had expected him to be a tool, a means to an end, a part of the prophecy that she would have to endure. But he was more than that. The way he looked at her, not with awe or fear, but with respect, was unsettling and unfamiliar. And his quiet strength, the way he carried himself, made her question everything she had been taught. The council had set the date for their union to be formalized, but there was still so much Ilara didn't understand. She had been told that this human marriage would break her curse, allowing her to bear children and secure the future of her people. But what if it wasn't true? What if the prophecy was just another way to control her? A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Myra walked in, her usual calm expression replaced by a hint of urgency. "Your Highness, we need to talk," she said softly. Ilara frowned. "What is it, Myra?" Myra stepped forward and lowered her voice. "It's about Captain Miller." Ilara raised an eyebrow, surprised. "What about him?" Myra hesitated, then continued. "I've been watching him closely, and I think there's something you should know." Ilara's curiosity piqued. She motioned for Myra to continue. "He's not like the others, Ilara," Myra said. "He doesn't just follow orders, he questions things. He's different." Ilara leaned back in her chair, her thoughts racing. "Different how?" "Different in a way that I think could be dangerous," Myra said quietly. "He doesn't seem to care about the prophecy, about what the council wants. And more than that, he's been asking questions about Veldari history, about the curse, about everything. I don't think he believes in the prophecy, at least not the way we've been told." Ilara frowned. "So you think he's trying to undermine everything we've been told?" Myra shook her head. "No, not necessarily. But I think he's trying to find out the truth, and that could be dangerous for both of you." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that Noah might be digging into things he shouldn't made her uneasy. But why? Wasn't he just trying to understand the situation? After all, she was just as much in the dark about the prophecy as he was. "I need to speak to him," Ilara said finally, determination setting into her voice. "I need to know what he's really thinking." Myra gave a small nod and left the room, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts. As much as she hated to admit it, Myra's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. If Noah didn't believe in the prophecy, then what was the purpose of this union? Was there something they were missing? Something that even the Veldari elders did know? She couldn't let the answers remain out of her reach. She had to find out what Noah truly believed. A few hours later, Ilara stood in front of the door to Noah's quarters. She hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts, then knocked. There was a pause before she heard the muffled sound of footsteps approaching. "Princess Ilara," Noah said as he opened the door. "What brings you here?" His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Ilara felt a wave of discomfort. She had expected this encounter to feel more like a confrontation, but instead, it felt like an invitation. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, and for the first time, Ilara realized that she didn't know what to say. "I need to speak with you," she said, trying to push past the awkwardness. "It's about the prophecy." Noah stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. "Of course, please come in." Ilara entered the room, feeling the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. Noah's quarters were simple, yet practical, nothing extravagant, unlike the royal chambers she was used to. It seemed like a reflection of who he was, straightforward, unpretentious. He gestured to a chair and Ilara took a seat. She could feel the tension building between them. She had questions, so many questions, but before she could ask them, Noah spoke first. "Are you still angry about all of this?" he asked, his voice low. "I understand if you are. This whole situation is strange." Ilara looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "I'm not angry," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "I'm confused. I don't know what to believe anymore." Noah nodded, sitting down across from her. "I get that. This prophecy, the council, this marriage, it's a lot for anyone to handle, especially for someone in your position." Ilara's eyes searched his face. "Do you believe in the prophecy?" Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he seemed to consider her question carefully. "I believe that there's something to it. I mean, you're here and I'm here, right? But I don't think it's as simple as we've been told. There's more to the story, more to you, more to your people, and I don't think either of us should just accept things as they are." Ilara felt a pang of hope, but it was fleeting. "What do you mean?" Noah leaned forward, his expression serious. "I think the Veldari have been keeping something from you, something about the curse, about the prophecy. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I've been looking into it. And I think there's a way we can break this, without everything you've been told." Ilara felt a surge of both excitement and fear. Could it be true? Could there be a way out of this? "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Noah looked at her, his eyes steady. "We have to question everything. The prophecy, the council, the laws you've lived by your whole life. There's something hidden here, Ilara. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm not going to stand by and let us both be dragged into something we don't understand." Ilara's heart raced. Could Noah be right? Was the prophecy really a lie, or was there a deeper truth, one that even the Veldari elders couldn't see? "I'll help you," she said, her voice firm. "We'll figure this out together." Noah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Good. We'll find the truth, no matter what it takes." As Ilara looked into his eyes, something shifted inside her. She had never imagined that the human she had been forced to marry would become an ally in her fight for the truth. But in that moment, she realized that this union could be more than just a way to break a curse. It could be the key to unraveling everything she had been taught about her people, her future, and the prophecy that had controlled her life for so long. And with Noah by her side, she felt a new sense of hope. Together, they would uncover the secrets that had been hidden from her for all these years. They would rewrite the prophecy, and in doing so, they would shape a new future for the Veldari and for themselves. The tension in the air was palpable. The days following her conversation with Noah had been filled with uncertainty and quiet determination. Ilara couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Could it really be true? Could the prophecy, the very thing that had ruled her life, be a lie? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that nothing made sense. The prophecy had always felt like a trap, an unshakable fate she had no control over. And yet, here was Noah, a human soldier, suggesting that they could break free from it. The Veldari had always told her that there was no way around the prophecy, no way to escape the role she had been given since birth. But now, with Noah's words echoing in her mind, Ilara began to wonder if she had been misled. What if everything she had been taught was wrong? What if the truth had been hidden from her all along? She had to find out. It had been a week since that fateful conversation with Noah. They had met in secret several times since, discussing their plans in hushed tones. Noah had begun to gather information, reaching out to other humans who had interacted with the Veldari over the years. And every time they met, Ilara felt a little more certain that they were on the right path, but the danger of their actions loomed over them. The Veldari Council, especially Elder Varnak, had made it clear that they were watching closely. Ilara could feel the weight of their eyes on her every time she entered the council chambers. They were waiting for her to fulfill the prophecy, to marry the human and bear the next generation of rulers. But what would happen if they found out that she was questioning the prophecy, challenging the very foundation of her people's beliefs? Ilara didn't know, but she couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. If the prophecy was a lie, then the Veldari were bound by something false, something that had kept them shackled for centuries, and she couldn't allow that to continue. Noah had suggested they meet in private once again, this time to discuss their next steps. They would need to move carefully, gathering more information without alerting the council to their plans. Ilara had agreed, knowing that their time was running out. The longer they waited, the more the pressure would build. She walked quickly through the corridors of the royal palace, her mind focused on the task ahead. The guards standing at attention as she passed didn't seem to notice her, their eyes fixed forward as always. She had long ago learned to move through the palace unnoticed, slipping past the watchful eyes of her people. It was a skill she had honed over the years, one that would serve her well now. When she reached the small chamber they had been using for their meetings, she found Noah already there, pacing back and forth. He looked up as she entered, his expression serious but hopeful. "We've gathered a lot of information," he said, his voice low. "And I think we're getting close. I've found something that could change everything." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Noah handed her a small data pad, its screen flickering to life as she took it. On the screen were several historical records, ancient texts that detailed the Veldari's earliest days. Ilara's eyes scanned the text, her fingers gently scrolling through the pages. The words were difficult to decipher, ancient and written in a long-forgotten script. But there, in the margins of one of the texts, was a symbol she recognized. It was the same symbol that had been etched into the palace walls for centuries, the symbol that represented the prophecy. She looked up at Noah, her brow furrowed. "What does this mean?" "I think it's a clue," he said. "A clue that points to the truth about the prophecy. The symbol is a key, but it's been hidden for centuries. The Veldari have kept it secret, using it to control the royal family. But if we can decipher it, if we can unlock its meaning, we might be able to change everything." Ilara's mind raced as she absorbed the information. The prophecy had always been tied to this symbol, this ancient symbol that she had seen countless times. but she had never thought to question its significance before. To the Veldari, it had always been a sacred emblem, a mark of their ancient heritage. But what if it was more than that? What if it was a lie, a tool to keep the royal family in check? "If we can figure this out," Elara said, her voice steady despite the growing excitement within her, "we can stop the prophecy from controlling our lives. We can break free." Noah nodded, his eyes focused on her with determination. "Exactly. We just need to find the rest of the pieces. We know that the symbol is linked to the curse, but we don't know how. But with your help, I'm sure we can uncover the truth." Elara's thoughts raced as she considered their options. This was their chance to uncover the truth and change everything. But it wouldn't be easy. The council would never allow them to succeed, and they would stop at nothing to maintain the power they held over her and her people. "I'm ready," Elara said, her voice firm. "Let's do it." They spent the next few days working together in secret, scouring the palace archives and studying ancient texts. Noah's knowledge of human history had proved invaluable, allowing them to connect dots that Elara had never even considered. As they pieced together the fragments of the prophecy, they discovered something shocking. The Veldari had always believed that the prophecy was a gift, a blessing that would ensure the survival of their people. But what they hadn't known, or hadn't wanted to know, was that the prophecy wasn't about ensuring their survival. It was about control. The elders had manipulated the prophecy to maintain their hold on power, using it to force the royal family into compliance. The curse wasn't some ancient fate. It was a carefully crafted lie, designed to keep the Veldari princesses in check. Elara's heart pounded as the realization hit her. The prophecy wasn't a curse. It was a tool of oppression, one that had been used to control her, to limit her choices, and to ensure that the council's power remained unchallenged. She turned to Noah, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is it. This is the truth." Noah smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "We're getting closer, but we still need to figure out how to break the curse. We need to find a way to show the council the truth." Elara nodded. "And we will. Together we'll expose the lies and we'll take back our future." For the first time in a long while, Elara felt a sense of hope stirring inside her. The prophecy that had defined her life for so long was nothing more than a lie. And now, with Noah by her side, she had the power to change it. But as they prepared for the final confrontation with the council, Elara knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, and there were many challenges yet to face. But she was no longer the helpless princess bound by fate. She was a woman with a purpose, a woman ready to fight for the truth, and for her future. The days leading up to the council meeting felt like an endless stretch of time. Every moment was filled with anticipation, a quiet undercurrent of tension that only seemed to grow with each passing hour. Elara stood in front of the large mirror in her chambers, looking at her reflection, unsure of the woman who stared back at her. She had always seen herself as the princess, tall, regal, and poised to inherit the throne. But now that role felt far away. She was no longer just the princess. She was something more, something that couldn't be defined by the traditions that had bound her. Noah's words, their shared discovery, and the truth they had uncovered all weighed heavily on her. The prophecy that had controlled her life was nothing more than a lie, a tool used by the council to maintain their power. The thought of standing before the council now, knowing everything she knew, filled her with both dread and resolve. She couldn't go back. There was no going back to the life of a helpless princess who followed the prophecy blindly. She had to confront them. She had to fight for the future she now knew she deserved. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. "Come in," Elara called, her voice steadier than she felt. Myra entered, her face a mixture of concern and encouragement. She had been Elara's constant ally through everything, the one person she trusted more than anyone. "You're ready, Your Highness," Myra said quietly, her gaze lingering on Elara for a moment. "I can see it. You've changed." Elara turned to face her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I have, haven't I?" she said, her voice laced with a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "I'm not the same woman who walked into that council chamber a few weeks ago." Myra nodded, her expression softening. "And that's why you're going to change everything. You found the truth, Elara, now you must show them." Elara took a deep breath, feeling a surge of strength rise within her. "I will. I won't let the council dictate my future. I won't let them control me anymore." With Myra's support, Elara felt ready. She knew that this was her moment, the moment when everything could change. The weight of the prophecy had been lifted from her shoulders, but now she carried the burden of truth. It wasn't just her life she was fighting for anymore. It was the future of the Veldari people. The council chambers were quiet when Alara and Noah entered. The familiar air of formality filled the room, the high, vaulted ceilings and ancient walls echoing with the weight of tradition. Elder Varnak, the head of the council, stood at the front, his piercing gaze fixed on her as she entered. The rest of the council members sat in their usual places, their faces unreadable, as though they were waiting for the inevitable conclusion of the prophecy to unfold. But Alara knew better now. She knew that what they were waiting for would not happen, not today. "Princess Alara," Elder Varnak began, his voice carrying the authority of years of leadership. "You have come to fulfill your destiny, to marry your chosen mate and fulfill the prophecy. Your people await your decision." Alara stood tall, her back straight as she faced the council. The eyes of every member were upon her, but she didn't flinch. She had no intention of following their rules anymore. She wasn't just a puppet to their traditions. She was a woman, a leader, and it was time for them to see her as one. "No," she said firmly, her voice clear and unwavering. "I will not marry Captain Noah Miller to fulfill your prophecy, because the prophecy is a lie." A collective gasp filled the room. Elder Varnak's eyes narrowed, and for the first time the council seemed unsettled. "What are you saying?" Varnak demanded, his tone sharp. "The prophecy has been the foundation of your people's history for centuries. It has never been wrong." Alara took a step forward, her voice rising with passion as she spoke. "That's exactly what you want us to believe, but the truth is the prophecy was never meant to guide us. It was meant to control us, to keep us under the council's rule. It was created to force me into submission, to marry someone from another species because of some ancient law that only you and your council have upheld." The council members exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale with shock. Alara could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had never expected her to speak out like this, to challenge the very core of their power. But she could feel Noah's presence beside her, his quiet support fueling her courage. "The prophecy is not about destiny," Alara continued. "It is about control. It's about keeping the royal family in line, keeping us trapped in a web of lies and traditions. And I won't be a part of it anymore." Elder Varnak opened his mouth to speak, but Alara didn't let him. She had to finish what she started. "The curse that I was told I carry, the inability to bear children, was never a curse at all. It was a tool used to make me believe that I had no choice. But now I know the truth. The curse was never real, and I don't need to marry a human to fulfill any prophecy. I am the future of the Veldari, and I will make my own path, one that is not bound by the lies of the past." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. No one spoke for a long time. Alara could hear the pounding of her heart in her chest as she waited for their response. What would they say? Would they try to silence her? Would they attack her for challenging the prophecy that had guided their people for so long? Finally, Elder Varnak spoke, his voice quiet but laced with disbelief. "You have no right to say such things. The prophecy has been the guiding force of the Veldari for centuries. Without it, we would be lost." Alara shook her head. "No, you are the ones who are lost. You've allowed this prophecy to control your people, to keep them trapped in a cycle of fear and obedience. But I will not be part of it any longer. I will lead our people into a new future, one where we are free from these lies." The council members seemed unsure of what to do. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed downright furious. But Alara knew that her words had shaken them. They couldn't deny the truth she had uncovered. They couldn't ignore the fact that the prophecy was nothing more than a manipulation of their people's beliefs. "No," Elder Varnak said at last, his voice cold and final. "You are a princess, and you will marry as the prophecy dictates. You will do as we say." Alara stood tall, her eyes locked on the elder. "No, I will not, and you will no longer hold power over me or the Veldari people. I will take my place as the rightful ruler of our people, free from the chains of your lies." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, one by one, the council members began to stand. Some had looks of defiance in their eyes, while others seemed to hesitate, unsure of what to do next. But no one spoke against her. No one challenged her. Alara felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she looked around the room. The prophecy was no longer their guiding force. It was her future that would shape the Veldari now, and with Noah by her side, she knew they would face whatever challenges came their way together. "You're right," said a voice from the back of the room. Ilara turned to see one of the council members, a woman named Lyra, standing. "We have been blinded by tradition for too long. Maybe it's time we listen to you." Ilara's heart surged with hope. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward freedom. And with that, the future of the Veldari was no longer defined by the lies of the past. "Then let's build that future," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Together."